for all of you who just joined, hello. If you want to introduce yourself in the chat box, it's so that we can maybe understand why you're here and what company you're dialing in from, and maybe we can custom tailor some of our thoughts to you a little bit, but also just welcome you. I am not presenting today. For those of you who regularly come to our webinar series, any of the 430 webinars that we've done in the last 16 years, I'm just here to say hello and help out. I'm going to turn off my video, and this is the first High Noon webinar. High Noon is an agency that is part of the Agital brand now. So it's also Agital, just like Exclusive Concepts is now Agital. 7 agencies, entrepreneurial thinkers that have all come together to justicely get together and change all of marketing. But really excited to have them present on this webinar series for the first time, and hopefully first of many, many, many. So please be active in the chat, ask your questions. And I think with that, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to go away. And if you need me, I'm here.
Thanks, Nick. Great opening act.
We love that. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We really appreciate it. We are so excited to talk to you all today about left brain meeting right brain and data driving decisions with your creative and then also your marketing strategy. So with that, Jenny, do you want to talk a little bit about what to expect?
Yeah, so in the next hour, we're going to start by discussing the role that data can play in the creative process. And we're going to do this by actually breaking down the dichotomy in marketing between performance and creative. Then we're going to show our creative asset toolkit of sorts. That's the frameworks and processes we use to engage both our creative and analytical thinking, and how that helps us operationalize the creative process. And then lastly, we're going to walk through how we put this into practice with a case study for one of our clients, a large hospital system that serves the Phoenix metro area.
All right, so we're just going to dive right in. I get the lovely job of introducing my wonderful colleague, Jenny. It has always been an honor to work with Jenny. She is smart, she is funny, she is everything, and she is also the director of content strategy at Agital and our lead storyteller, which means that she leads all of our content and copywriting efforts, as well as helps us create those meaningful stories for our clients and brands. And a little bit more just about Jenny as a person. She is our resident wordsmith and grammar expert at the agency. So she is always telling us what words mean, giving us the new word of the day, which is always really fun. And then she is also an outdoors woman. She is an avid runner. She is a hiker. As she said earlier, she is living the summer in Butte, Montana. So getting all of that outdoor adventures in. So I always like to think Jenny would be a fearsome opponent in a spelling bee and also in the outdoor space as well. So
Jenny. Okay, and then Katie Fleming. So we have worked together for almost 3 years now. So a fun fact about Katie is she is afraid of bananas, and my favorite shirt has bananas on it. So we are both friends and foes at the same time. So she's our director of brand and CX in the Phoenix division. And the way we've structured this, the way Katie has structured this is really a trifecta of brand engagement. So it involves both primary and secondary research, brand building and redefining brands and everything under that umbrella, and then also defining customer experience. So this holistic approach really sets her up to deliver meaningful connections from our clients to their audiences and really, reinforce a brand community for our clients. Katie is the embodiment of art and science. She takes the raw material of data and numbers and forges something really meaningful out of it. And she's clever, funny, formidable, and delightful. Oh, and she has an MBA and NNG certifications. She's very credentialed. Okay, so why data matters for creative. So I want to start by stepping back a little bit and thinking about what creative means. We have creative as a word in our broad cultural narrative as well as within marketing specifically. And so we often, when we talk about like the creative process, we think of it as something very free-flowing, amorphous, driven by inspiration, very abstract. But if we think about creative and marketing as essentially an applied art, then it's not surprising that these cultural narratives we have about art and creativity have filtered into and shaped how we think about this process. But within art, within the fine arts themselves, there's a long history and precedent for trying to put barriers around the creative process to help it flourish. Because something like waiting for inspiration to strike isn't always very helpful when you need a proactive approach, when you need to be meeting deadlines and things like that. And because even creative ideas, the most creative of ideas really need something more than creativity to bring them to life. They need discipline. They need, all kinds of things. So one thing I like to think about is in painting, you typically have a canvas, and that in itself is the thing that defines this is where the art is, and this is where it ends. This is the boundary of it. So even at its most basic level, we have constraints built into the creative process. And this is often called constraint-based creativity. And the idea behind it is that putting yourself in a box, defining that box, allows you to be more creative within that space. So data for us is one example of a constraint that we use, and it's the one that's like particularly relevant and useful for marketing when we are thinking about how is our marketing working toward achieving our clients' business goals.
All right. And we want to get everyone engaged and involved in our conversation today. So before we dive into the conversation between performance marketing and then also creative marketing, would love to hear from everyone if you believe your current company or wherever you're at now is more performance driven or creative driven. So I'm going to launch this poll really fast, and everyone should see it pop up on their screen. All right. Getting a mix here, but it's looking like we're getting about like 50-50 with 43%, and then more performance driven is coming up on about 50%. Less of you are saying more creative driven, which is interesting. All right, we'll give it another second for everyone to participate here. And thank you for your participation too. It's always really fun for us to see where you all are coming from so we can talk more about your background. All right, I'm going to end the poll. I'll share the results with everyone too, and you should be able to see them as it pops up. Okay.
Awesome. Okay, so we titled this webinar Left Brain Meet Right Brain, and that's because we have this pervasive cultural belief that right-brained people tend to be more creative and left-brained people tend to be more analytical. And then your handedness is supposed to be the opposite of that. So as like a left-handed person who definitely identifies as a creative, I'm like, yes, 100% check all the boxes. But I have really bad news for you if this is also a framework that you reference a lot. It has been largely debunked since about 2013. So you might be asking, like, well, why are we using this as a framework for talking about the creative process in marketing if it's not even relevant? And I think it is still relevant because it's actually a great analogy for the performance versus creative one in marketing. The distinction is a powerful narrative, but I think what we're going to show is it's largely illusory. It remains powerful, but we can, the thing about narratives is like they can be rewritten. And so that's what we're trying to do here, to really bridge that gap and think about creativity as part of what drives performance. And when we think about the right brain, left brain, there's still a lot of research being done in it, And there probably is important distinctions in hemispheric functions, but they're not the thing that determine personality or preferences or aptitudes. And so one of the things that the research into this field has illuminated is that the distinction we make between creativity and analytical is itself a little bit of a false dichotomy, right? So you can think of creativity as being a very analytical process. You can imagine someone like learning a piece for the piano, right? And there's a lot of memorization and diligence and things like that. Or you can think of activities like math and engineering as requiring creativity to really be successful and interesting and push the fields forward. So we're trying to really break down these dichotomies and think about how we can develop a framework that encompasses both.
I think one interesting thing that's really relevant to us marketers, right? Like that dichotomy that Jenny was just talking about has been applied to marketing. I think for years and years and years, you've seen, especially with the rise of performance marketing, the struggle between the creative arm and then the performance driven arm. And oftentimes they're going head to head. It's not working collaboratively together. It is more so fighting each other for more preference or for more budget and all those things, when really at the end of the day, that collaboration and working hand in glove together is what creates that highly performing marketing campaigns. So performance-based marketing. I know that's a big term in the past few years that has been really at the top of everyone's list. We want the ROI, we want those KPIs. But at the end of the day, a performance marketing campaign will not perform to its top level without compelling creative. And how we see creative's role in performance marketing and how those things actually play nicely together in the sandbox instead of against each other is that first and foremost, that creative helps capture that initial attention. In such a crowded marketplace, this attention is so important and is going to lead to those KPIs like click-through rate. But it also provides that emotional resonance with your target audiences. This one is very important. And as a brand strategist, I am speaking this language all the time. Creating that connection and community with your audiences is so important. And as also the consumers shift in what they care about and being more values driven or individuals, that organization really needs to craft that community, which is going to shorten the sales cycle and also get people just more engaged in general with your brand and then your marketing campaigns. And then lastly, it makes your brand really memorable. It increases that brand affinity. People can see your ads, get that compelling creative, whether it's something that's funny or something that resonates or is really relevant to them. That creative is playing that role in telling the story of your brand in a way that actually builds that ROI presence and gets those KPIs that you're looking for from a performance perspective. But as we will go through, data is what supports everything from a creative perspective, but then also performance marketing perspective. And we would not be doing our jobs today if we just spewed a bunch of information about our thoughts and opinions. Everything that we will be sharing is driven by data and is backed up by some key research that has been done in the field. So I've got some great numbers that I want to share that really solidifies creative as being a really important element when it comes to performing marketing. And there was a recent meta study that uncovered creative plays a very significant role in ad performance. And it actually noted that 56% of all outcomes of this ad campaign and performance were attributed to creative, which made it the biggest determining factor in the price and audience reach. I think a very provoking stat and interesting one, as oftentimes as performance marketers, we're looking at things like, is the targeting spot on? How else can I shift and evolve the specific parameters that I'm building these campaigns in, the different mediums that I'm using, the different vendors. But this just goes to show that creative is a really important piece. And any good researcher knows you can't just rely on one source, so don't worry, we've got more for you. There was also an NCS and Nielsen marketing study that really also solidifies that last point of creative being that and playing that really important role. It shows that creative, you'll see in that chart on the right hand of the screen, that creative was really the lion's share contributor in percent of sales driven by advertising. So I think this one is a really interesting one because this directly shows the impact that creative in an ad is having to that bottom line and that ROI and money in the door for your business. This study was conducted with almost 500 marketing and brand campaigns, so a really great sample size to prove that. And creative had 47% of that sales contribution, and then reach being the next highest at 22%. So again, I think all this goes to show, and all this data supports that while marketing is a really complex ecosystem, there's many moving parts. If you've ever, actually created a marketing campaign from start to finish and ran that and evolved from that marketing campaign, there's so many different things and so many different levers that need to be pulled. But with that performance-driven mindset, we cannot forget that if you're looking for optimal performance, you cannot forget and you can't skimp out on the creative and forget how important that creative process is.
Great. And then what this chart here is showing is, it's a little small, but the dark blue at the bottom represents performance using only a performance-based approach to marketing. And so what it is uncovering is that there tends to be a performance plateau, right? So especially if you are prioritizing a search-based approach, what is missing from that activity is really generating the demand as well. And so this study, there's an econometrician, Grace Kite, that went through and evaluated performance only based approaches versus when you are supplementing those performance-based approaches with brand building activities. And we think of brand building activities as also being more creative of endeavors, right? You're really having to think not just about the offer and the click-through rate, but the larger messaging ecosystem that you are putting out there and how you are emotionally connecting with the audiences. And so as you engage in those brand building activities, you are supplementing the performance-based approach and really creating the holistic ecosystem that is both driving the demand and then also putting things in market that encourage and allow your audiences to convert in the ways that you want them to. And so this is really like the healthy approach, right? Having both and. Okay, so we've looked at some of the macro factors that have really influenced this dichotomy and shaped how we think about and talk about marketing these days. So what we're going to do next is discuss how we've applied these insights to inform our process and how we use them to support our clients. So at Agital, we take this basic ethos of performance marketing, right? We want to drive ROI. We want to attain measurable goals, but we want to apply it across all stages of the funnel, all aspects of customer experience. So really taking that goal-oriented approach and thinking about it more broadly. So beyond individual targeting and marketing mix tactics, we think about performance in terms of those holistic business goals, your brand, the relationship you're fostering with your customers. So in order to do this, we've deployed a process and a toolkit where we have the right information and frameworks that guide this larger endeavor.
All right. So it's time for another poll. And again, this is a little teaser before we get into the next section. What tools do you use to inform data-driven creative decisions? And I know tools is kind of one of those words that is very broad in meaning, and we're doing that purposely. But just want to hear from you before we jump into and dive into our toolkit. What tools are you all used to using in your day-to-day life or have used in the past to help you with your creative decisions or marketing decisions? And there's no right or wrong answer, as always. All of these tools are useful. All right. Seeing some good results here. It looks like a lot of tools have been used that are in our list. And then also drop in the chat if there are any others that are not listed on this short list that we have. Looks like we've got a lot of people with primary research, personas, 77 and 73. Holly, yes, we're going to talk about personas here in a second. It's so interesting. Personas, I feel like oftentimes are used, in tandem with market segments or different different people have different meanings or ways of using it. So it's always interesting to see how others are using those tools like personas. All right, Donna, social media and emails. Awesome. All right. I'm going to end this poll just so we can get back to the good stuff. Okay. All right, so we talked about tools really as our beginning statement into our process and what you need to be successful in producing creative that performs at the end of the day in market. And with great tools comes great responsibility. And I always say you've got to do your homework to use the tools correctly, to create the best tools that are going to help you be successful. That homework means that market research, learning about your customers, learning about the ecosystem as a whole. And really, we have this process that we follow. Oftentimes market research is this, very large endeavor. There's many different things that you can do when it comes to market research, from competitive audits to social listening to, just general marketing audits as well. But really, at the end of the day, even though there are all those different levers that you can pull when it comes to market research, how it helps drive that creative process and you be successful with your marketing is, at the end of the day, pretty simple. We think of it as starting with that market and consumer data collection. So first, looking at your ecosystem at large. What are your competitors doing? Where are there opportunities to differentiate? What are the external forces that are potentially shifting the way people are thinking about your brand, others in the industry and within your category, and then other just general things about their life as a whole? Then once we have that understanding of where the opportunities for your business really lie, then we dive deeper into understanding who your customer is. And this, for me, is always the most fun, because you get to put your psychology hat on a bit and understand what makes people drive them to do things. What do they care about? What are their values? And understand really the why and the context behind why people are making those different decisions or behaving in a certain way. And then lastly, all of those insights come together to create a direction where you are planning to go with your marketing strategy. And then also even it can expand outside of marketing and into your business. And data, really, at the end of the day, if you're just using it and putting a bunch of numbers on a screen and graphs, really is just numbers. And so having the insight backed behind it, where we're thinking and having the forethought of, what is the goal that we are trying to reach, and how is this data answering those questions to get us closer to that goal, is what makes data really powerful and impactful for your business. It creates that direction for your brand to go, instead of just having, a research report that then gets put up on the top shelf. You're actually using those insights day in and day out to help with creating and crafting that creative message, also helping and craft that media strategy, and then helping evolve your business. And then once you have those directional insights, you're able to hone those insights into building tools for empathy and performance. And this is where things like the tools we just talked about, whether that's customer journey maps, personas, and that market research, really come together into a helpful framework that helps you be successful in understanding your audiences and connecting with them on a deeper level, but then also helping with those general performance strategies and helping you hit those KPIs and ROI goals. All right, so I know we talked a lot about different tools, and there are plenty more than just these two and what were on that poll list that we had, but two that we find really important within this process are behavioral personas and customer experience maps. So I'll go into each of these briefly. It looks like most people have used personas in the past, which is awesome. We'll talk a little bit about how we view personas. Really, personas, in the light of how we use them for marketing, is a tool that allows you to go beyond demographic information and create those like psychographic profiles for your audiences. And we like this to be very behaviorally based information, because at the end of the day, what people value, how people act and behave, and what they think is what is actually driving them to act. And as marketers, at the end of the day, yes, we're trying to get certain KPIs and ROI in the door, but really, when you're thinking of it at its core, we are driving someone to take a different action and change their behavior. So understanding them at this deeper level and their motivators and the barriers and what they value as a person helps us be so much more effective in our marketing strategies both from a creative standpoint and then also from like a performance and media standpoint. So what does this look like? Everyone builds personas a little differently, and you can go to Google and see, templates for personas that have a whole host of different inputs included within there. How we usually approach it, again, we're lighter on that demographic information, but it is included. And then the lion's share of what we are talking about included in these personas are those behavioral and psychographic items. So how do we get that information? Usually we build these personas through a wide array of different research. That could be secondary research. We're doing surveys, we're doing usability studies, all and above everything you can think of. And it's really the culmination of all those things together that makes these really powerful. So when it comes to demographic information, you could be using things like current customer data, survey data, and you can really think about this as more of the quantitative information that is coming in. Then the meat and potatoes of the persona, the behavioral and psychographic side, that's the goals that they have, the values that they hold dear, the personality traits, behaviors, beliefs, barriers. This is what I think of as the contextual data that tells us more about who the person actually is, instead of just what the demographics show about, what they look like. This allows us to have more in-depth and personal conversations with those audiences. And typically we derive that information from surveys with open-ended questions, with one-on-one conversations via stakeholder interviews, focus group usability studies, really those qualitative data points that allow us to understand the context and why people do certain things. And then finally, we include within our personas these channel preferences. And this is pulled from layering in both that demographic side and the behavioral side and figuring out what are the best, media channels that would be for this persona and we can reach them. And oftentimes you have great media tools that allow you to pull this information, also using some of that demographic information to inform so that you know exactly where you can reach them and you can be really effective and efficient in reaching that audience. All right, so we talked about the inputs, what's included in creating that persona. Now I think the more important discussion for today specifically is how we actually use that information. What is the output? So when we're thinking about this from a larger scale, this is really that first tool within our toolkit that helps us create empathy for our audiences and be very, very specific in how we target and how we set up our strategies. So when it comes to that demographic information, right, this is really helpful for our media team specifically, because it lets us set up the right targeting parameters and know exactly how we should place campaigns and target them across different mediums that we're doing. Also, for the goals, needs, behaviors, and beliefs from a media side and performance side, you can use this information to further hone in that targeting and placement strategies. But then I think where this comes into play from a creative perspective is you're able to craft that unique content with your audiences and create that connection. And then finally, those channel preferences is really where the two teams can collaborate. And that is where the creative teams come together and with the media teams, and essentially they think, okay, what are the right channels that are reaching these? And then how do we use those best practices when it comes from a channel perspective to create the creative that is going to best fit within that medium? And I'll pause here for a second. Looks like maybe this is not caught up. Is everyone seeing the right screen?
We're seeing it now. I think
Okay,
just
cool.
all results were up,
Okay.
maybe one slide.
All right, well, sorry about that, everyone.
We're seeing the slides, but I think the audience did not see it, sorry.
Okay.
I think
Cool.
we didn't close the poll. We just closed it for ourselves instead of for
Okay.
everybody.
Got it.
Sorry about that, y'all.
Happens all the time.
All right, so we talked about personas. Then the next step within this toolkit building is customer experience maps. And I like to think of taking these customer experience maps is like building the personas into this like mega superhero. It takes those personas and provides so much more context that is helpful for all teams and all departments and really your business as a whole. And really what these customer experience maps do as a tool is it allows us to understand what that specific persona is doing and feeling throughout their journey with the different interactions and touch points they have with your brand. So it has the impact, and you can take those learnings to impact everything from marketing all the way to business operations. All right, so the inputs here, you have a bunch of data that is already communicated through those personas, but this information takes that a step further. And it's usually derived from that primary research efforts like usability studies, secret shoppers, and it has many pieces to it. If you've ever seen like a full customer experience or customer journey map, right, there's a lot of different things going on there. But at the end of the day, a customer experience map is really simple in the organization and the foundation of which it is built. And it really starts with those phases and interactions. And those phases and interactions note exactly which steps your audience is going through in interacting with your brand. And then those goals and emotions allow us to connect where they're interacting with our brand with their emotional state and what they're trying to achieve each step of the way. So what this means and how we actually use this in practice, and as Jenny mentioned at the beginning, we do have a case study where you can see it all come together here. But with those elements as our inputs, really the big output is the recommendations for media mix and then also creative strategy. We see these customer experience maps as really like the catalyst or core part of our strategic marketing build. And it allows us to take those unique touch points and connect them with what is going to drive that action and behavior change along their journey so that we are meeting them where they're at with messages and with creative in places that they are. So essentially these customer journey maps, you always hear the saying in marketing, you want to reach them at the right people in the right place at the right time with the right creative. This journey map allows you to do that in a very, very effective and also, less costly way because you're being more efficient with your ad dollars because you know exactly who you're targeting, when you should have different messages, and you know that they will perform better because you have a better understanding of the person and how they're interacting. And now you can stop hearing me for a moment and I'll hand it back to Jenny.
Okay, so, we've talked about all of the pieces of this creative-driven performance marketing approach. Well, I should say some of them, but there's another underlying element, which is the organizational structure that can support this kind of a work. So a lot of times teams and organizational structures are not always set up to facilitate the conversation and connection between performance and creative as efficiently and as effectively as they could. So poll, and we will do the poll correctly this time. We want to know, how well does your organizational structure promote cross-team collaboration?
I'm launching it. Give me a second.
Yeah, please launch it.
All right, answers are starting to come in here. We've got a good group of collaboration rock stars. We love that. Collaboration is the best part of our job. Then we've got a big chunk here too saying that there's cross-team collaboration, but it could be better. There's always room for improvement, but we also, I think, had that issue at the start of our work and bringing our teams together to really hone in this creative strategy. So we'll share some tips and tricks on how we started to create that collaborative environment. And then we do have a smaller subset here, about 23% saying we need better processes for collaboration. So you're in the right place. That's what Jenny's going to go through next. And Donna, you're solo, but there's always other avenues, different departments. There's ways to build in that collaboration, and it makes jobs so much more fun too. All right, I'm going to end the poll correctly this time.
Yes.
Okay, I think I've done it, but please shout if you're still seeing the poll in the chat or if we're good.
Okay, so one of the things that we have seen in terms of a typical structure, and this definitely represents how we used to be structured as well, and we've taken some steps to move away from this, it's in this very linear path where different teams are performing discrete different tasks in the process, and the handoffs between each are kind of functioning as that connective tissue to get all the assets created. So I think one of the benefits of this approach is that it makes roles and responsibilities very clear, just inherently in how it's developed. So each team knows their part, and it essentially functions as an assembly line. But what we found is one of the large downsides is that, each of these individual teams has their own strategic lens that they are applying. But then what can be missing is this broader strategy that needs to unite all of them together, right? And that a lot of times the research and the brand are treated as the strategy guiding them, and that is very important. But there's also a higher level of strategic thinking required, one that informs, what research even needs to be conducted and gathered, how we're going to be building that and leveraging that. So one of the things we have done is to move away from this linear process and toward more cross-team collaboration. And I'm going to get really nerdy for a second because I used to be a medievalist, and there's this little metaphor that was used during the medieval times about the way society was structured. And it was used to kind of justify and reinforce the feudalism and religious aspects of society. We don't necessarily need to use that aspect of it. But essentially the way it worked is you had a three-legged stool. And the stool was a functioning society, and there were three legs, and those represented like the three pillars that upheld a functioning society. So they were the clergy, those who prayed, the knights, those who fought, and the farmers or yeomen, those who worked. And so the idea was that if any one of those jobs went away, that society would not be able to function. And so we think of this, in terms of our little stool where ROI is where we rest our bum at the end of the day. And what we have to do is have the different teams be supporting and laddering up to that larger goal. And the way we see it is if any one of these legs, we have four represented here, but if any one of them were not supporting that larger business goal vision of what is the ROI at the end of the day, that the whole operation kind of crumbles, and there becomes huge gaps that aren't going to make it successful. And so one of the things too is we've tried to create these buttresses between the legs. So these cross-functional things where we're adding additional layers of support within this metaphor. So you can think of like the relationship between media and research, which was very well explained by when Katie was discussing the outputs of the persona, right? What is the research we can do to really inform that media mix in a more meaningful and holistic way? Or in terms of brand and creative, right? We don't just want the creative to adhere to brand standards. We want it to advance the brand's position in the market. So there really needs to be a lot of communication and cross collaboration in order to do that. If this is something that you are struggling with and interested in learning more about, we do have a recent white paper that addresses it a little bit more in depth. Devin, if you would be able to drop it in the link, it might be relevant. It's the creative strategy one. That would be great.
On it.
Okay, so what we're going to transition to next is our case study where we walk through an example of how this comes to life. But because you're here, because we care about your success, let us know if you would like us to follow up with you. We can do a call where we find out more about your pain points, offer solutions. We can discuss, if we can support you, whether that's with your creative, your performance, or ideally the strategy that would drive both of them to yield that larger ROI.
We'll give everyone a second here while it's live.
Yeah, I'll just say, I'm talking to people all the time about branding. They don't know what they don't know. And speaking with brand experts, often just like changes fundamentally how they think about branding. In one case, they think it's very from the hip. when talking to actual branding experts, they realize there's science and there's art to it. And it's something that can be controlled and improved and tested. And to that point about the meta study, it could be the difference between lackluster performance and gangbuster growth. So to have this free 30-minute call, brand discovery, which really everyone should say yes to, um, is very meaningful. Could be a turning point for your business.
Great. Well, thanks for letting us know. We will be following up with those individuals who are interested. And now we are going to move on to our case study in action.
I know it's sometimes hard to understand. All right, there's a lot of moving pieces. We've talked about how each of these things pulls in through another, and we use that collaborative cycle, as Jenny just talked about, to make sure that we are elevating the marketing. But I always think it's so much easier to see an example and see how this is actually used in practice. So as Jenny mentioned at the beginning, we have a case study that we're going to walk through where you can see how all these different parts and pieces really play into that larger whole. And then really at the end of the day, bring really great performance for one of our clients. So just a bit of a background into our partnership with Valleywise Health. We had been their agency for 5 years, and they were recently rebranding from MIHS, Maricopa Integrated Health Systems, to Valleywise Health. So at a very pivotal time in their business, we started working with them to try and elevate their brand, elevate their creative, and then ultimately just their marketing in general needed a full refresh. They had 12 community health centers. And they have 4 hospitals, so they're really a large health system within the Maricopa County or Phoenix area. And our partnership was a little bit of everything with them. We were a full integrated marketing partner. So we did research. We always were doing creative and content development for them. We built their website and continued to do testing and user testing and blog building for their website. We did brand execution items. We built their brand guidelines, voice and tone guides. We did brand experiences and activations. And during COVID, we had a lot of robust PR support. And even we did do a small project where we helped design one of their pediatric wings in a hospital. So a little bit all over the place, but really great partnership because we were really ingrained and felt like part of the marketing team and part of the business. So like we just talked about with our process and how we like to start these conversations and start our partnerships, conducting in-depth research. So while we talk about research really at the start of the engagement, really research is something that never ends. You can always find out more information. And as time goes on and as things happen in just the general environment, we need to understand deeper what shifts are happening with our consumers. So COVID was a great example, especially for Valleywise Health. Within healthcare, right, things were shifting. People were thinking differently about how they approached healthcare and really acting a lot differently than they had in the past. So while we conducted some in-depth research at the outset of our relationship with Valleywise, we were continually driving different research reports, doing different studies along the way so that we could continue to map how those shifts were impacting the brand and then impacting how people were interacting and their behaviors. We did everything from just general industry analysis to specific service line analysis, like behavioral health studies as far as what's going on in the Arizona market with behavioral health. We did competitive audits with primary, secondary, tertiary competitive sets. We did market share analysis to understand where their brand stood within the larger healthcare system, marketplace, market segment creation. We did build behavioral personas for them, usability studies for their website, cultural research, patient surveys, patient interviews, you name it. We did really robust work from the research side. And what that turned into was some amazing tools that I'll let Jenny have the thunder on this one as we get further into this, but really, really helped us hone in on our marketing strategy. In the past, Valleywise didn't really have many tools, or while they had a general understanding demographically at who their patients were, they're having a hard time really grasping those aspirational audiences or getting more people to have that stronger brand perception and start coming to them for more than just a hospital visit, but really coming to them as their healthcare provider across both, primary, specialty care, and then hospital care as well. So what these personas really helped us do is a few different things. First, it helped us understand beyond those demographics. So instead of just, what their age was, what their ethnicity was, we really understand what they cared about when it came to healthcare. And especially in that post-COVID environment was very, very important to have that deep understanding and be really attuned to what they needed out of a healthcare provider. And then it also helped us understand a little bit more about like the cultural inferences that we needed to be aware of. They had a very wide cultural audience. And I think this is where when you have a really robust cultural audience that you are speaking to with a lot of different ethnicities involved, it's very important to understand, not just from a demographic standpoint, but what are the nuances from a cultural perspective that are coming into play with how they're behaving and interacting. All this moved into our customer experience mapping. And this was another project and another tool that helped us not only with our marketing, but really also helped them with their business as a whole. There was a lot of things that we recommended from an operational standpoint that would help our marketing efforts. And this is where I love how customer journey maps can help your business, because at the end of the day, yes, we can adjust marketing and communications, but if you are not walking the walk and talking the talk, right? There's that disconnect, and people can smell the BS a mile away. And so this helped us really connect those in-person and physical touch points with more of the digital and marketing touch points, so that people just had a better experience with Valleywise from top to bottom. And now I'll pass it over to Jenny to show, I know we've talked a lot about personas and journey maps, but show how they actually came to life and into practice within the creative.
Yeah, so the creative that Valleywise was running before this research, from a messaging perspective, they really leaned into excellence and the notion of exceptional care, right? That's a great message for a healthcare provider. But what the research uncovered is that their audiences were really looking more for warmth, acceptance. There was a lot of emotional barriers to engaging with like the medical institutions. And so the more that we could understand and address those directly in the creative and marketing, the more we would be able to reach Patricia, the proactive patient. And then visually, they were black and white photography. It was a lot of single people, done in, a very serious manner. And so that was not contributing to the warmth and the invitingness that these audiences were looking for. So we did a full creative refresh. And so knowing that we needed to really tap into that, building community type approach. We had headlines like doctors who get it, the families first. The other thing that Patricia was looking for from a rational perspective was really convenience. And so we started to position Valleywise as this one-stop shop, right? You can go to a primary care doctor, and then you can also see your specialist. So it's also helping to differentiate them in the market. And then also, an important audience for them was the Hispanic population in Arizona. And so one of the things that our research uncovered is the Hispanic population did not feel included in the marketing that they had in market before. And so we really took a step back, and instead of doing a translation-based approach where we are just taking the English ads and putting them into Spanish, we developed its own campaign for a Hispanic audience. You'll notice that these are in English and Spanish. The majority of the Hispanic population in the Phoenix area speaks English, but we did some usability studies where we discovered that even if they are English speakers, they appreciate seeing the marketing in Spanish. And so the messaging is also catered to this audience a little bit more. So more of a focus on family and community, and really positioning health as a broader community activity and not just an individualistic one. And then also the ads in Spanish are, let's see, it's leave your health in our hands, and the health of your family. We provide health for your family with like caring. And so it is also reinforcing the warmth that we wanted to really infuse the brand messaging throughout. So that is how we used those tools to inform the creative. And then, as we like to say, the proof is in the performance pudding. So let's see, you can see that the media performance experienced a 10% conversion rate average across all campaigns and channels, which is great. And this resulted in surpassing ValueWise's appointment request goal by 127%. And then this impacts their larger business goals by boosting the revenue in the immediate as well as the longer term potential, especially as their business model is set up to have people see a range of providers and really treat it as that one-stop shop. So really building up their patient base and increasing that downstream revenue potential as well. The brand building aspects of these campaigns also helped raise the share of voice in the market, boosted media mentions, and with, basically a 16-to-1 return on ad spend and less than $20 spent per appointment request acquisition, ValueWise was really able to put powerful and compelling creative campaigns in market while also experiencing performance that they hadn't had before, which benefited their overall business goals. So this is really a clear example of how data can drive creative, that drives performance, that drives real and lasting impact.
So beautifully ended, Jenny, with a nice little bow right on top. I know we have about 7 minutes left, so would love to hear any questions that you have. We do have a little Q&A function that you can use, but you can also probably just drop them in the chat as well. Let's see what pops
Oh,
up.
and Chris asked, over what period of time was the performance slide? So that was year over year, but taken in quarter two, correct, Katie?
Correct.
Yeah.
Any other questions for us, or just things you want to chat about, want to learn more about? Well, we've got you for 7 minutes.
Holly asked if the slide deck is going to be available. Yes, you will get an email with the recording of it after this wraps. So you'll be able to reference them all there.
And a downloadable presentation as well.
Great.
Chris, I'm seeing more detail on experience maps. Yes, the boxes were very small in that specific slide. A lot of different things go into experience maps. This might be where if you sign up for that 30-minute call, we can go more into detail. But essentially what a customer experience map has in it is it starts with what the scenario is at the very top with a specific persona. And what that scenario does is gives us context into exactly what we're looking for. So like in ValueWise Health's case, we were looking at patients or prospective patients who were looking to book an appointment with a new healthcare provider. Then from there, you have the different phases or steps along the way. And what those phases indicate is like sections or chunks that people would be interacting with. And it just helps us organize really the data that we have. So you could think of this as like a typical marketing funnel from everything from awareness to conversion, or it could be even more specific, like does research for a healthcare provider, talks to family and friends, all those different things could be catered to exactly what you're looking for within those experience maps and what data you've collected. And then from there, it layers on the emotional state and the goal. So it could be, when I'm in that research stage from a ValueWise perspective, my goal is to find a healthcare provider that has convenient locations and really high quality doctors. And that would depend, of course, on what persona you're building it for. And then from there, it would have emotions throughout the touch points. So if they see a billboard and it has, a message that really resonates, they would have a positive emotion and be, something of a quote like, oh, wow, that really speaks to me, what I saw on that billboard. Then if they call and have a poor experience with a customer service rep, that would be a negative experience and a negative emotion that they were feeling. So you see how that emotional state would drive throughout those different interactions. And then at the very bottom of those customer experience maps would be like the opportunities and recommendations from both an operational and a marketing standpoint. So we could say, hey, you didn't have a great experience, or some of the low points that we found were due to some operational inefficiencies, or they felt like they were on hold too long. The chat didn't work well on the website. And so that's where we can recommend, hey, let's have some additional communications from a marketing standpoint here, but then also let's have the conversation with operations department or whatever department really like owns that specific facet of the business so that we can help make a more seamless journey throughout. So I know that that is very high level, but hopefully that helps answer your question a little bit more, Chris.
I have a quick question for the group. So outside of launching a new brand, how do brands generally know that it's time to start looking at their brand again?
Yeah, I can start with that, and then Jenny, you can feel free to jump in. I think the biggest thing is if you are noticing that you're not getting much traction in your marketing campaigns and like your dollars are not going very far, I think that's one indicator that you could have. I think also the biggest one that we usually see is people just not really understanding their audience at all, or really going like, who am I supposed to target? I'm setting up this marketing campaign and like I have maybe this rough idea of who I'm supposed to be reaching out to, but I don't actually know, right? And when you don't actually know who that audience is, it's hard to create a market positioning that feels really, true to the business, but also resonates really deeply with people that are going to be part of that community that you are building. So, I mean, there's plenty of different things that come into play when it comes to brand discussions. But I would say, like, if you are having ineffective marketing, if you are noticing also like poor reviews, or you're seeing things in social media such as like negative comments pretty frequently, or you do not know who your audience is, those are probably three major triggers that should say, oh, maybe I should look at the brand as a whole and how we can connect the brand ethos better to the audience and better to the products and services that we are offering.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that too is especially those moments when a brand is evolving, if there are new products and services being offered, Gen Z having more buying power now is changing the engagement. So really understanding that like brands evolve based on both what they are doing and what their audiences are doing. And if some of those variables are changing, it's usually worth revisiting and thinking through, okay, what do we know about the audiences and how do we want to be positioning ourselves in relationship to them as well?
I also say too, as a final thought, I know oftentimes you hear of branding and you're like, oh man, that's going to cost a lot of money. That's going to take a lot of time. But the beautiful thing about branding is everything is so scalable, and there are specific things that you can do that don't take a full rebrand and a new logo and new tagline and full overhaul of what you already have. It just might take some small tweaks to adjust that message, to better define your audiences, to understand really more what the interaction points are that really help take you to the next level. So it doesn't all have to be, all or nothing. There's definitely those very tiny things that we can do from a brand perspective that impact the business.
I know we're at time. I want to thank everybody so much for, especially those Donna, Bob, for participating and being active. Really appreciate it. Don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any follow-up questions. We're here to support. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.